The sweet scent of success had taken 15 years to build, and every morning when she unlocked the doors to Crown and Culture Boutique, Rose felt that same flutter of pride in her chest. The store, nestled in the heart of downtown Atlanta's bustling shopping district, had grown from a tiny dream into a thriving reality. Its windows sparkled with elegant displays featuring contemporary fashion pieces that celebrated African heritage with modern flair. Rose remembered the days when this space was nothing but an empty shell with peeling paint and creaky floors. She'd spent countless nights scraping wallpaper, painting walls, and planning layouts, all while working a day job to keep her dream alive. Her grandmother's words would echo in her mind during those tough times. "Baby, nothing worth having comes easy, but everything worth having comes right on time." The boutique had started small, with just a handful of carefully curated pieces. But Rose had an eye for fashion that spoke to both tradition and trend, and word spread quickly. Local fashion bloggers couldn't get enough of her unique collections. Customers would drive hours just to browse through her carefully selected inventory, each piece telling its own story of cultural pride and modern elegance. As business boomed, Rose found herself working 14-hour days, trying to manage everything from inventory to customer service. Her regular customers had become more like family, stopping by not just to shop, but to share stories over cups of tea in the cozy sitting area she'd created near the fitting rooms. The store had become a community hub, a place where people felt seen, valued, and understood. That's when she decided it was time to expand. The store needed proper management to handle its growing success, and Rose knew she couldn't do everything alone anymore. After careful consideration and multiple interviews, she hired Thomas as the store manager. His resume was impressive, with years of retail management experience at high-end boutiques. During the interview, he spoke passionately about customer service and seemed to understand the store's unique vision. The first few weeks with Thomas went smoothly. He was efficient, organized, and seemed to have a knack for visual merchandising. Sales numbers looked good, and Rose finally felt like she could breathe a little easier. She even started taking Sunday afternoons off to have dinner with her family, something she hadn't done in years. But there were subtle signs she'd missed, little moments that should have caught her attention. The way some of her longtime employees started seeming tense during staff meetings. How certain customers mentioned feeling watched while shopping. The small changes in store policy that Thomas implemented without consultation, always with a perfectly reasonable explanation ready. Rose had built her business on the foundation of creating a welcoming space for everyone, especially for those who'd ever felt out of place in high-end boutiques. She'd carefully trained her staff to treat every customer like family, regardless of how they dressed or what they could afford. But lately, something felt different in the air of her beloved store. The warm, inviting atmosphere she'd worked so hard to create was shifting, almost imperceptibly at first. That Saturday morning had started like any other. Rose had an early meeting with a new vendor, discussing a potential line of handcrafted accessories. She dressed up for the meeting in one of her favorite business suits, but afterward, she changed into comfortable clothes to tackle the inventory count in the stockroom. It was something she still liked to do herself, feeling that hands-on connection to every piece in her store. As she worked in her office, reviewing numbers and planning the next season's purchases, she had no idea that her world was about to be turned upside down. The security cameras silently recorded as Thomas arrived for his shift, his actions in the coming hours about to set in motion a chain of events that would test everything Rose had built. The gentle hum of the store's activity continued outside her office door, customers chatting, hangers sliding along racks, the soft background music playing overhead. Rose smiled to herself, feeling grateful for how far she'd come from those early days of struggle. But fate had other plans for this ordinary Saturday afternoon, and the piece she'd worked so hard to create was about to be shattered in ways she could never have imagined. The afternoon sun streamed through the boutique's front windows, creating warm patches of light across the polished wooden floors. Rose sat cross-legged on the office floor, surrounded by inventory sheets and seasonal planning documents. She changed into her comfortable weekend clothes, a pair of well-loved jeans and her favorite casual sweater, perfect for the hours of detailed work ahead. Outside her office, the store hummed with its usual Saturday energy. The gentle chatter of customers, mixing with soft background music, created that perfect shopping atmosphere she'd spent years perfecting. Through her partially open office door, she could hear the familiar sounds of hangers sliding across racks and the cheerful ding of the register. The first hint that something was wrong came as a shift in the store's energy. The regular rhythm of weekend shopping suddenly changed, like a record skipping its groove. Rose noticed the voices outside growing tenser, the usual pleasant murmur of conversation turning sharp and concerned. She set down her papers, her instincts telling her something wasn't right. As she stepped out of her office and into the main store area, the scene before her made her stop dead in her tracks. Thomas stood near the front counter, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a loud, theatrical voice that carried across the entire store. "Yes, officer, she's refusing to leave. She's becoming increasingly aggressive, and I'm concerned for our customers' safety." Rose's mind struggled to make sense of the situation. Who was Thomas talking about? She scanned the store, expecting to see some kind of disturbance, but all she saw were her regular Saturday customers, many of whom were now standing still, watching the scene unfold with confused expressions. "She's wearing jeans and a brown sweater," Thomas continued into the phone, his eyes locked directly on Rose. "She keeps claiming she works here, but I'm the manager and I've never seen her before." The realization hit Rose like a physical blow. He was talking about her. "Thomas," she said, stepping forward, her voice steady despite the sudden pounding of her heart. "What are you doing?" "I'm the owner of this store." She reached for her phone to pull up proof, but Thomas raised his voice even louder, speaking over her. "See, officers? She's becoming more aggressive. Please hurry." His face wore an expression of exaggerated concern, but there was something else in his eyes, something cold and calculating that Rose had never noticed before. Several of her regular customers had begun pulling out their phones, some recording, others already calling people. Mrs. Chen, who'd been shopping at Crown & Culture since its opening day, stepped forward. "This is ridiculous. That's Rose. She owns this store." But Thomas had positioned himself between Rose and the front door, continuing his performance. "Ma'am, please stay back. The police are on their way, and this situation will be resolved shortly." He addressed the other customers with a practiced, professional smile. "Everyone, please remain calm. Security is on the way to handle this unfortunate situation." Rose felt as though she'd stepped into some bizarre alternate reality. This was her store, her creation, her life's work, and here she stood, being treated like an intruder. She could see some of her newer employees hovering uncertainly at the edges of the scene, clearly confused by the conflict between their manager and the woman they knew as their boss. Through the front windows, she saw the flash of red and blue lights. Her heart sank as 2 police cars pulled up outside her boutique. This couldn't be happening. Yet it was, and with each passing second, the situation was spiraling further out of control. "I have documentation," Rose said firmly, though her hands shook slightly as she pulled up her business license on her phone. "I can prove right now that I own this store." But Thomas had already moved to meet the officers at the door, speaking quickly and gesturing emphatically in her direction. Time seemed to slow down as the officers entered her store, the same store where she'd hosted charity events, fashion shows, and community gatherings. The same space where she helped countless customers find the perfect outfit for job interviews, weddings, and special occasions. Now she watched as uniformed officers approached her, their hands resting near their belts, while Thomas stood behind them with an expression of manufactured concern. The familiar chime of the store's door opening rang out as more customers entered, stopping short at the scene before them. Someone gasped. More phones came out. And Rose stood her ground, her grandmother's words echoing in her head. "Stand tall, baby. When truth is on your side, you never need to bend." What happened next would be captured on dozens of phones, shared thousands of times, and spark a conversation that would extend far beyond the walls of Crown & Culture Boutique. But in that moment, Rose could only think of how quickly 15 years of hard work and community building could be threatened by one person's actions, and how she had to stay strong not just for herself, but for everything and everyone her store represented. The 2 officers approached Rose with practiced caution, their expressions professionally neutral. "Ma'am, we've received a complaint about someone refusing to leave the premises," the taller officer said, his hand resting casually on his belt. "Could you step outside with us to discuss this?" Rose took a deep breath, keeping her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Officers, there's been a serious misunderstanding. I'm the owner of this store. My name is Rose, and I can prove it right now." She reached slowly for her phone, making sure her movements were calm and deliberate. But Thomas stepped forward, his voice dripping with false concern. "Officers, this is exactly what I was telling you about. She's been making these claims all afternoon. I've been the manager here for 3 months, and I've never seen her before today." The second officer, shorter with graying hair at his temples, glanced between them. "Ma'am, do you have any identification on you?" "Of course," Rose replied, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened her phone. "I have my business license, store documentation, everything right here." But before she could pull up the files, Thomas interrupted again. "She's been showing everyone some pictures on her phone, claiming they're official documents," he said, shaking his head. "Officers, I'm worried about the safety of our customers. She's becoming increasingly aggressive." Rose looked around at her beloved store, now turned into a stage for this unbelievable drama. Regular customers were watching with a mix of shock and outrage. Mrs. Chen had moved closer, her phone recording everything. Behind the register, Rose's longtime employee Mai stood with tears in her eyes, clearly torn between her job and speaking up. "This is absolutely ridiculous," called out a voice from the back of the store. An elderly woman stepped forward, her silver hair gleaming under the store lights. "I'm a retired district court judge, and I've been shopping here since this store opened. That woman is Rose, and she most certainly owns this establishment." The officers exchanged glances, but Thomas wasn't backing down. "With all due respect, ma'am, anyone could claim anything. As the current manager, I have to think about store security." His voice took on an edge of authority that made Rose's blood boil. That's when something inside Rose shifted. The fear and shock gave way to a deep, burning determination. Standing straighter, she looked directly at the officers. "My office is right through that door. Inside, you'll find 15 years of business records, awards from the Chamber of Commerce, and photos of me at every major store event since we opened. I built this store from nothing, and I will not be treated like a criminal in my own business." But Thomas had positioned himself between Rose and her office. "Officers, she's becoming confrontational. I think we need to handle this situation now." The next few moments seemed to unfold in slow motion. Despite protests from customers and the retired judge, the officers moved toward Rose. "Ma'am, please put your hands behind your back. We need to sort this out at the station." The cold touch of handcuffs against her wrists sent a shock through Rose's system. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not in the space she'd created to celebrate culture and community. Not in front of customers who'd become family over the years. As they led her toward the door, more phones were recording. Someone had gone live on social media. Mai had finally found her voice and was frantically calling Rose's sister. Mrs. Chen was demanding badge numbers and promising legal action. Through it all, Thomas stood by the counter, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. But he'd underestimated one thing, the power of community. As Rose was escorted out, she heard the voices rising behind her. Customers were sharing photos of her at store events. Others were pulling up the store's website on their phones, showing her picture and bio to the officers. The afternoon sun hit Rose's face as they stepped outside, and she blinked back tears. Not tears of shame or fear, but tears of determination. In 15 years of business, she'd faced countless challenges, discrimination from suppliers, banks that wouldn't give loans, customers who doubted her expertise. She'd overcome it all. This too would be overcome. A small crowd had gathered outside, drawn by the police presence at the popular boutique. Rose held her head high as she walked to the police car. She knew what this looked like. A black woman in handcuffs being led out of a high-end store. But she also knew who she was, a successful business owner, a community leader, a woman who had built something beautiful from nothing but a dream and determination. As the police car door closed behind her, Rose caught a glimpse of her store's sign reflecting in the afternoon sun. Crown and Culture Boutique gleamed in gold letters against the brick facade. She'd chosen that name carefully, believing that everyone deserved to be treated like royalty while celebrating their heritage. The irony of being arrested in her own castle wasn't lost on her, but Rose knew one thing for certain: this story was far from over. Within minutes of Rose being escorted out of her store, social media exploded with activity. Mrs. Chen's video had already been shared hundreds of times, and more footage from different angles kept appearing online. The retired judge, who everyone knew as Judge Patricia, was on her phone in the parking lot, making calls to every legal contact she had built over her 30-year career. Inside the store, the atmosphere had transformed from shock to action. Longtime customers weren't just leaving, they were organizing. Me, still wiping tears from her eyes, had pulled up years of staff photos on the store's computer. The screen showed Rose at every holiday party, every fashion show, every community event the store had hosted. "I've worked here for 6 years," May announced to the officers who remained at the scene. Her voice shook but grew stronger with each word. "Rose hired me when no other boutique would give me a chance. She taught me everything about fashion and business. How dare you let this happen?" Thomas tried to maintain control of the situation, but his authority was crumbling. "Everyone needs to leave. The store is closing early today due to this unfortunate incident." His practiced smile had become strained, his composure starting to crack. But the customers weren't going anywhere. A young woman who'd been shopping in the back stepped forward, her phone displaying the store's website. "Look at this About Us page. There's Rose, right there in the founder's story. Are you telling me you never once looked at your own store's website?" More evidence kept emerging. Regular customers shared photos from their phones, Rose helping them find perfect outfits, Rose hosting community events, Rose giving fashion advice to teenagers preparing for their first job interviews. Each image, each story, each memory shared became another piece of proof. Outside, the crowd had grown larger. Local news vans were pulling up, attracted by the social media buzz and calls from concerned community members. The story was spreading. A black business owner arrested in her own store while her manager watched with a smirk. Judge Patricia had finished her calls and was now addressing the gathering crowd. "I've known Rose since she opened this store with nothing but dreams and determination. I watched her transform this empty building into a cornerstone of our community. What happened here today isn't just an incident, it's a symptom of a deeper problem we cannot ignore." Back inside, more employees had arrived after seeing the social media posts. They'd brought with them more proof: old employee handbooks with Rose's signature, photos from staff trainings, even birthday cards she had given them over the years. Each piece of evidence made Thomas's story seem more ridiculous, more obviously malicious. A group of local business owners from neighboring shops had gathered too, all of them ready to vouch for Rose. The owner of the cafe next door brought up photos from joint community events they'd hosted together. The florist from across the street talked about the weekly flower deliveries she'd been making to Crown and Culture for the past decade. The police officers still at the scene were starting to look uncomfortable. One of them was on his radio, likely communicating with the officers who had taken Rose to the station. The mountain of evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. Mrs. Chen, still recording everything, had started a live stream that was quickly gaining viewers. "This is what we deal with," she said into her phone camera. "This is what happens when people think they can abuse their power." But they forgot something important. They forgot about community. They forgot that when you hurt one of us, you deal with all of us. Thomas's facade was fully cracking now. He kept checking his phone, perhaps realizing how quickly the situation was spiraling beyond his control. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by a nervous glance that darted between the exits. In the midst of all this, May had found something else: security camera footage. The store's modern security system kept recordings of the past week, and she had pulled up clips showing Rose working in the store day after day. There was no denying the truth now. It was playing out in high definition on the store's computer screen. As the afternoon sun began to set, casting long shadows through the store's front windows, the energy hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown stronger. People weren't just angry, they were mobilized. Phone calls were being made, emails were being sent, and social media was ablaze with the story. The truth was emerging not just through official documents and security footage, but through the collective voice of a community that refused to stay silent in the face of injustice. Each person who spoke up, each photo shared, Each story told added another crack to the false narrative Thomas had tried to build. This wasn't just about proving Rose owned the store anymore. It had become about something bigger. About standing up against prejudice, about the power of community, and about ensuring that justice would be served. As the videos continued to spread online and more people gathered outside Crown and Culture Boutique, one thing became crystal clear. The truth couldn't be handcuffed. At the police station, the truth unfolded like a deck of cards being spread across a table. Rose sat in a small interview room, her wrists finally free of handcuffs, as officer after officer came to apologize. The evidence wasn't just clear, it was overwhelming. "Ma'am, we found multiple files in our database confirming your ownership of Crown and Culture Boutique," said the precinct captain, his face etched with concern. "We also received over 50 calls in the past hour from community members, including several prominent business owners and a retired judge." Rose rubbed her wrists, more tired than angry now. "I tried to show the officers my documentation at the store," she said quietly. The captain nodded, making notes and looking increasingly troubled. Meanwhile, back at the store, Thomas's carefully constructed facade was crumbling fast. The investigating officers had pulled up his employment history, and what they found painted a disturbing picture. This wasn't his first time being involved in racial discrimination incidents. He worked at 3 different high-end boutiques in the past 2 years, an investigator explained to Rose over the phone. Each time, there were complaints filed about his treatment of black customers and employees. He managed to leave each position before any formal investigations could be completed. The security footage from Crown and Culture told an even more damning story. Officers reviewing the past week's recordings found multiple instances of Thomas following black customers around the store, scrutinizing their actions while leaving other customers to browse freely. They saw him assigning black employees to backroom duties more frequently than their colleagues, keeping them away from customer interactions. One particularly revealing clip showed Thomas in Rose's office the previous day, carefully going through her personal belongings. He had been planning something, perhaps waiting for the right moment to make his move. "We found these in his desk," said Detective Lynn, spreading out a collection of papers. They were printouts of emails Thomas had sent to corporate offices of other boutiques, presenting himself as the owner of Crown and Culture, claiming he was looking to expand the business. He was trying to build connections using your store's reputation. Rose's phone hadn't stopped buzzing with notifications. The story had gone viral, with major news outlets picking it up. #JusticeForRose was trending, along with #ShopLaCount. People were sharing their own stories of facing discrimination in retail spaces, creating a wave of conversation about racial profiling in stores. Local business owners had organized a solidarity rally outside Crown and Culture. Hundreds gathered, holding signs and sharing stories. The flower shop across the street had donated roses, one for each year Rose had been in business. The cafe next door was giving out free coffee to protesters, each cup decorated with a message of support. Back at the station, more details emerged about Thomas's scheme. "He was planning to claim you'd abandoned the business," explained to Detective Lynn, showing Rose a draft of a letter found on Thomas's computer. "He thought if he could create enough doubt about your ownership, he could somehow take control of the store during the confusion." But Thomas had underestimated 2 things: the power of community and the strength of Rose's business documentation. Every contract was in order, every license up to date, every tax payment recorded. She had built her business with careful attention to detail, perhaps knowing that as a black woman business owner, she would need to be beyond reproach. "Your employees provided us with dozens of photos," the captain said, sliding over a tablet showing images from store events. "Holiday parties, fashion shows, community fundraisers, 15 years of history that proves your connection to this store." The evidence painted a clear picture of a successful black-owned business that had become a cornerstone of the community. It showed Rose's journey from a small startup to a thriving boutique, documented through business records, community events, and countless personal stories. As evening approached, Rose's sister arrived at the station with fresh clothes and dinner. The 2 women hugged tightly, tears flowing freely now. "You won't believe what's happening at the store," her sister whispered. "The whole community is there. They're not letting this one go." Indeed, social media was flooded with videos of the gathering outside Crown and Culture. People were sharing memories of their first time shopping there, of Rose helping them find the perfect outfit for special occasions, of the way she had created a space where everyone felt welcome and valued. The truth hadn't just come out, it had emerged with the force of a community standing together, refusing to let injustice go unchallenged. Each piece of evidence, each witness statement, each shared story added another brick to the wall of truth that was now impossible to ignore. As Rose prepared to leave the station, Detective Lynn had one more thing to share. "We found something else in Thomas's emails," she said, her expression serious. "He's been in contact with a group that targets successful minority-owned businesses, looking for ways to take control of them. This goes beyond just your store." The revelation added another layer to the day's events. This hadn't just been about one store or one incident. It was part of a larger pattern, a systematic attempt to undermine black business owners. But in trying to destroy what Rose had built, Thomas had instead exposed a truth that needed to be seen and sparked a conversation that needed to be had. The days following the incident brought waves of change that rippled far beyond the walls of Crown and Culture Boutique. News vans lined the street outside the store, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal sunflowers. Inside, Rose sat at her desk, looking through the hundreds of messages that had flooded her store's social media accounts. "You need to see this," said May, holding up her phone. The morning news was running a special report. Thomas had been arrested not just for filing a false police report, but for his connection to a larger scheme targeting minority-owned businesses across 3 states. His perfect resume had been built on a foundation of lies and carefully concealed discrimination complaints. The 2 officers who had led Rose out in handcuffs were facing disciplinary action for failing to verify her identity before making the arrest. The police department had issued a formal apology, but more importantly, they were implementing new training protocols. "This incident has exposed gaps in our procedures," the police chief admitted in a press conference. "We're taking steps to ensure this never happens again." Local business owners had organized a weekend-long shopping event celebrating black-owned businesses. The streets were filled with people carrying shopping bags, moving from store to store, showing support with their presence and their purchases. Outside Crown and Culture, customers waited patiently in a line that wrapped around the block. "I drove 2 hours to be here," one woman told a news reporter. "When I saw what happened to Rose, I thought about my own daughter who dreams of opening her own business someday. We need to stand up for each other. We need to show that our community won't tolerate this kind of discrimination." Inside the store, Rose had made some changes. The security cameras that had helped expose Thomas's behavior now had signs beneath them, "Protected by Community." She'd hired 2 new employees, both young women who'd been turned away from other retail jobs because of their race. "Experience isn't just about years on a resume," Rose explained to a reporter. "It's about understanding our customers and making them feel welcomed." The incident had sparked important conversations in the retail industry. Other store owners began sharing stories of similar experiences, of subtle discrimination and not-so-subtle attempts to undermine their businesses. A group of business owners formed an alliance, creating a network of support and resources for minority entrepreneurs. Judge Patricia had become a regular presence at the store, hosting weekly meetings with local business owners to discuss their rights and share strategies for protecting their businesses. "What happened here wasn't just about one store," she often said. "It's about making sure every business owner can feel secure in their own space." The police department's new training program included a section on implicit bias and proper verification procedures. Rose had been invited to speak to new officers, sharing her experience to help them understand the impact of their actions. "I'm not here to shame anyone," she told them. "I'm here to help you see the person behind the situation." Social media continued to buzz with updates. The hashtag #CrownandCulture had become a symbol of resistance against retail discrimination. People shared their own stories of being profiled while shopping, of having their ownership or authority questioned, of feeling unwelcome in spaces they had every right to occupy. But perhaps the most significant change was in the way the community had come together. The incident had exposed an ugly truth, but it had also revealed the strength of unity. Regular customers brought new friends to the store. Business owners who had never spoken before found themselves working together on community initiatives. Rose's store had become more than just a boutique. It was a symbol of resilience and community power. She expanded her mentorship program, helping young entrepreneurs navigate the challenges of starting their own businesses. Success isn't just about surviving, she told a group of aspiring business owners. It's about creating spaces where others can thrive too. The security footage of her arrest had become part of a training video for retail managers across the country. "Watch how quickly assumptions can escalate," the narrator would say. Notice how no one bothered to simply check the store's website or business registration. Local schools began bringing students to visit Crown and Culture as part of their business education programs. Rose would show them around, explaining not just how to run a successful store, but how to build a community around it. "Your business is more than just four walls and inventory," she'd tell them. "It's about the people who walk through your doors and the lives you touch." One afternoon, a young girl visited the store with her mother. She looked up at Rose with wide eyes and said, "I want to own a store like this someday." Rose smiled, remembering her own dreams from years ago. "You can do it," she told the girl. "And when you do, you'll have a whole community behind you." The incident that could have destroyed everything Rose had built had instead made it stronger. Each day brought new customers, new allies, and new opportunities to create positive change. The truth hadn't just come out. It had transformed into something powerful, something healing, something that couldn't be ignored or locked away. 1 year after the incident, Crown and Culture Boutique had transformed into something far greater than Rose had ever imagined. The store had doubled in size, expanding into the vacant space next door. But the real growth wasn't measured in square footage, it was measured in impact. The morning sun streamed through the new floor-to-ceiling windows as Rose unlocked the doors for a special anniversary event. The line outside wrapped around the block, just as it had done 1 year ago, but this time for a celebration rather than a protest. People carried handmade signs, not of anger but of triumph, "Community strong," and "Love wins," and "Black business matters." Inside, the store had evolved. The new space included a community meeting room where business workshops were held every weekend. Local entrepreneurs gathered here to share experiences, get advice, and support each other. The walls were lined with photos, not just of fashion, but of the community that had come together during that crucial moment 1 year ago. "Can you believe how much has changed?" May asked, arranging fresh flowers by the entrance. She was now the store's assistant manager, having completed the business management course Rose had encouraged her to take. The flowers, as always, came from the shop across the street. Their partnership had only grown stronger over the past year. The incident that could have destroyed everything had instead sparked a revolution in local business practices. Crown and Culture had become the flagship store for a new initiative called Community Commerce. Over 50 local businesses had joined, creating a network of support and solidarity that crossed all racial and cultural lines. Rose's mentorship program had expanded beyond her wildest dreams. She now worked with 20 young entrepreneurs, guiding them through the challenges of starting and maintaining their own businesses. 3 of her mentees had already opened successful stores in the neighborhood, creating a growing community of diverse business owners. "Remember when we thought this would break us?" Judge Patricia said, walking in with her morning coffee. She had become a regular fixture at the store, running a free legal advice clinic for small business owners every Tuesday. "Look at us now, stronger than ever." The security cameras that had captured that fateful day were still there, but they represented something different now. They were part of a new security network that connected all the businesses in the area. If one store noticed suspicious behavior or discrimination, they could alert the entire community instantly. The police department had made good on their promises. Their new training program, developed with input from Rose and other business owners, had become a model for departments across the country. Officers regularly visited local businesses, not to police, but to build relationships and understand the communities they served. Thomas's case had led to investigations of similar incidents across the state. His network of discrimination had been exposed and dismantled, leading to new protections for minority-owned businesses. The story had even inspired changes in state law, making it harder for people to exploit and target small business owners. As customers began flowing into the store for the anniversary celebration, Rose watched from her new office overlooking the sales floor. The space hummed with positive energy, people laughing, sharing stories, trying on clothes, and most importantly, feeling completely at home. Miss Rose. A teenage girl approached, clutching a notebook. I'm doing a school project on successful business owners. Would you share your story with me? Rose smiled, remembering all the young people who'd sought her out over the past year, looking for inspiration and guidance. Success isn't just about surviving the hard times, Rose told her, leading her to the community room. It's about using those moments to create something better. When I was handcuffed in my own store, I could have let anger consume me. Instead, I chose to use that experience to build something stronger. The community room walls told the story through photos and news clippings. But more importantly, they showed what had grown from that difficult day. Pictures of new business openings, graduation ceremonies from the mentorship program, community celebrations, and countless moments of triumph over adversity. As the anniversary celebration continued, Rose noticed something remarkable. The store was filled with people from all walks of life, shopping, chatting, and simply being together. The barriers that Thomas had tried to enforce had been replaced by bridges of understanding and support. The boutique's new slogan, painted in elegant gold letters on the wall, captured everything the store had become. More than fashion, we're family. It wasn't just about selling clothes anymore. It was about creating a space where everyone felt valued, respected, and empowered. That evening, as the sun set on a successful day of celebration, Rose stood outside her store, surrounded by her community. The retired judge, the neighboring business owners, her employees, and countless customers who had become friends, they were all there, all part of something that had grown from a moment of injustice into a movement of hope. What's next? Someone asked as they closed up for the night. Rose looked at her store, at the thriving community around her, and smiled. We keep building, she said. We keep growing. We keep lifting each other up, because that's what family does. The story of Crown and Culture had become more than just a tale of overcoming discrimination. It had become a blueprint for community action, a testament to the power of unity, and a reminder that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the most beautiful transformations. The truth hadn't just come out, it had bloomed into something extraordinary.